Hey, coffee experts. Those of you running independent coffee shops, you're always looking for ways that you can drop your costs. And we here at the Coffee Experts Club really understand that. And so we've started something called Indie Coffee Coalition. And what it's designed to do is to drop your costs on two of the things that you're probably experiencing the highest sales volume in your store. And that is energy drink and frat mix. Those two line items, we've created our own products and are offering you those products at a reduced cost so that you can cut out the Red Bull of America. You can cut out the main lines of energy drinks that you're doing and serve your own energy drink at a reduced cost on a line item that you're probably already making a lot of sales on anyway. The best way that you can grow sales is by dropping your costs and maintaining a current volume. So check us out at indiecoffee.co and we'll love to tell you more there.
Welcome to the Coffee Experts Club, where we discuss all of the insights, expertise, and drama that goes into making your passion your profession. Our hosts, Aaron, Ben, and Drew, are three coffee experts who have taken their coffee experience and turned it into true expertise. They have consulted with major coffee brands throughout the United States and beyond, providing operations expertise and growth strategy for drive-through openings, multiple locations, and everything in between. So brew yourself a cup and hang out a bit with the Coffee Experts Club.
Oh man, Ben, how's beautiful Eastern Washington?
Actually nice. It's 55 degrees outside. The sun's out. Like, this is the most sun this week I've seen in probably the last 3 months. So it's a nice change of pace. I'm more of a like cloudy, rainy weather kind of guy, true Pacific Northwest, but the sun is nice every once in a while.
Yeah, sun's been out a little more here too. Drew, how about you? You got some sun down in Belize. How's it feeling down in Belize?
It's actually been raining and semi-cold, like 65 the last week or two.
Stop
so
it.
The
Wow.
weather,
Stop it.
the weather,
Stop it. Semi-cold at 65. Knock that crap off. Ben, we
It
just
is
climbed down to the
cold.
20s and our boys talking about feeling semi-cold at 65.
Hey, I'm to the point where I'm not sweating all the time. So 65 is cold to me.
Remember Belizeans used to always tell us that? It's been a little chilly and we were like, what are you even talking about, Drew? You laugh and now you become a true Belizean.
Yeah, I won't wear a sweater because I want to really bask in that fresh air, but I'm getting to the point where it's chilly.
That's hilarious.
I'll take 65 any day of the week here in Southern Oregon. So anyway, good to see you boys. Hey, we saw some headlines. Ben, you want to kick us off on headlines?
Yeah, man, it's like another week, another Starbucks headline. It's funny. They're making changes for sure, but yeah, they if people hadn't seen it, they're planning to lay off about, I think it was 1,100 corporate layoffs, which is really interesting. It has a lot of connotations behind it, but it mentioned basically just layers of, in essence, middle management they're laying off. And I look at it more like they're probably in the trim the fat mode right now. Me and Drew were talking about this, and I think a lot of companies coming out of COVID came out of COVID really fat. Especially those companies that were deemed, necessary. Starbucks drive-throughs, they were, they got to stay open. So of course, I mean, even us, when we operated during COVID, like, we got to stay open. So we were just raking in dollar bills. And when that happens, you start to get a little fat. And then, a year or two outside of COVID, you start going, revenue isn't as high, inflation's a little bit higher. Consumers aren't spending as much. And we've still got all of this fat. I mean, ultimately it comes down to labor versus revenue. Is your labor out of whack with the revenue that you're bringing in? I mean, that's obviously what they're saying right now.
I think that it's such a good conversation to have when it comes to your own coffee shop, right? Because obviously, I know we've been talking about Starbucks a little bit lately, but more than anything, it's the tip of the spear of a conversation of how does your labor stack up? Do you know what your labor is? You know what I mean? I think a lot of business owners go off of this gut feeling. The danger of gut. We were just laughing about it yesterday, me and Drew, with you, Ben, when Wes would come in just outraged, like throwing up his arms and just be like, you need to get busy. What are you even doing back here? And it was like, I would have to have these conversations with Wes of, hey, like, Ben's running 150 employees as the director of ops. It's not going to look like it used to look. He's not going to be sweaty. Like, what do you want? Do you want him behind? Like, that's not, like, Ben's jobs now are behind a computer getting stuff done. Like, that's what he does now. That's his role. But understanding, but as long as your labor numbers make sense, that's how do we have the right size infrastructure for the sales that we have, and being really clear on, so we advocate a lot. Coffee Experts Academy, if you haven't checked that out, 35 modules. We go really deep. I think we go 4 modules into what your P&L should look like, and you should know what your labor percentage is. But we've even pulled that into how we do our scorecards when we do level 10 meetings with people on a weekly basis, looking at their dashboard of how should your sales be translating into labor? How many people should you have per shift? Like, how should these things be looking? And then who should be managing those? Because I don't think it should always be the owner, but making sure that you're not too deep on infrastructure. So I think all those things are very interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, and me and Drew were talking about earlier, and you kind of, said it perfectly. Like, what Starbucks is cutting is in essence the non-revenue earners, because they're not cutting baristas, they're not cutting location managers. They're cutting what they realized is that extra cost when it comes to labor that can't be swallowed up by more revenue, right? So you have this layer of management that they're not producing any profit or any
Yep.
revenue, but they are still a cost on the company. And I think what that translates down to when it comes to indie stuff is, your shops are going to produce, your management teams are there to produce your shops. But we've seen a lot of companies who, they may only have one or two locations and they say, we need a regional manager. And then that's where you kind of like, but do you? That's a big cost for somebody who's not producing revenue. Obviously, that job is important at a certain point because you need somebody to help manage all of those other managers. But I always say, like, take what Starbucks is doing and translate it down to your 2 locations, your 5 locations, your 10 locations, whatever it may be, because what they're going through or what they're facing is a good indication of what's happening in the market. So if people are turning down $8 coffees at Starbucks, and Starbucks is saying, "Okay, how can we trim the fat on our non-revenue producing labor," that's gonna at some point kind of trickle down to you as a company too. If people don't want to go to Starbucks, well, they're probably cutting back on their spending everywhere. So if people don't want Starbucks $8 lattes, they might not also want your $8 lattes. So you should probably also be looking at, okay, where's my labor out of whack? Is my in-shop labor good to as compared to the revenue, but also is my out of shop, labor good? Am I paying myself as an owner? Should I be paying myself this much? Am I paying a middle management level? Am I paying outrageous, cost to my vendors, for my cogs? Like all these things, if you see Starbucks doing a big shakeup like this, it should immediately translate to, okay, I should probably look at my own company and make sure I don't have any fat anywhere else either.
Well, I think one thing that the article mentioned was that they are being undercut by some competitors who are smaller. And I think after COVID happened, showed a lot of people, well, coffee was essential, and anybody who was a customer saw how busy those coffee shops became. And a lot of people who, either lost their jobs or were, on financial assistance. A lot of people made a lot of money during COVID, not just businesses. And so they're hungry to make their coffee shop, make it succeed, perform in the industry. And something that they have as a benefit over Starbucks is being agile.
Mhm.
They're smaller. They're able to make more personal relationships with vendors. They're able to, think quickly on their feet, change things that aren't working. One thing that Starbucks has going against it is that they are so big. And, when they did get comfortable, they're probably padding around the edges to just
Mhm.
when you have more money, you can invest in these things that are added infrastructure that when times get hard, you don't need that infrastructure. When things are good, you can have it. You can invest in the systems, invest in the structure, invest in the people, but you don't really know what you need until suddenly you're not making as much money. And then you're, okay, what is essential? What's not essential?
Mhm.
As a small business, pretty much every employee you're going to have is going to be essential. You're going to know everybody. You're going to know what they do. You're going to know how they operate. You're going to know what they're using their time for. And it's all going to be money making essential thing, especially if you're involved as an owner. And so one thing to keep in mind, something that we've done here, and I was talking to Ben about this, I was a little surprised at the necessity for them to cut labor because of their purchasing power. I would think something that is a big company like Starbucks has the ability to purchase in such large quantities of their cost of goods is a lower percentage than, what a smaller people can get. So to keep in mind, as you're small, if you're planning on growing, stay vigilant on those little things,
Mhm.
maintain relationships with vendors, watch the pricing as it changes, as it goes up and as it goes down. Watch for new competing vendors coming into the market. Who can you work with? Who can you build relationships with? As things change, you're going to have competitors come up too. I mean, since we've opened here, we have tons of competitors that popped up, and one thing that does is it keeps us on our toes.
Vigilant.
Mhm. I think that's a great point because what Starbucks is doing, like the big headline was the 1,100 people layoff, right? But what's also buried in that is that they're also cutting out about 30% of their menu. So they're dropping items that, are probably high cost items to them that they've identified aren't really being ordered that much, and they're shaving their menu too. So they're taking a big axe to, okay, we've gotten fat and happy. What can we do to cut our cogs and cut our labor and be more lean? I think to your point, Drew, like that's really hard to do when you're a giant corporation like that. It's much easier for us indies to go on a week to week, even month to month basis. I mean, in our L10s, we look at our scorecards every week. We can see that cogs and the labor go up and down, and we can see the order sheets, and we can say, okay, we need to stop. We need to cut this, or next month we're doing a price raise and we need to raise on these few items. It's much more easy to be agile as an indie and use that to your best advantage, because once you start getting up to that 20, 30, 40, 50, 5,000 location company, those are big turns that take a while to make. Like, use it to your advantage now to be able to make changes as quickly as you can.
I think that as I listen to you guys talk, the things that jump out to me here. And so if you're listening today and you've got a coffee shop or you're thinking about starting a coffee shop, I think all these things are good to take in mind. But I think that the shakedown that it starts at first is something that you're probably not going to love the sound of, because this isn't something that comes natural to you. And that is, your P&L needs to be clean. Your numbers
Mhm.
need to be tight, and not just like a standard P&L that you're pulling out of QuickBooks. Like, it needs to be specific to coffee. Like, it's very important. Like, we've gotten into several coffee clients lately where their P&L isn't speaking coffee. They haven't broken out their cogs in a way that they understand that. How do I even push and pull on my vendors? Because I pull a P&L and all my cogs are loaded into one spot. And I'm like, is that my milk? Is that my
Mhm.
ingredients? Is that, the beans? Is that the energy drinks? Is that, like, breaking it out to a way that makes sense to your particular business is really important. If you guys, anybody listening would want a sample template for how we do P&Ls, you can just ask us on any of our socials, just say P&L template. And we would love to drop you just our template from our P&L. That's also part of Coffee Experts Academy if you want to deep dive into that thing there. But would say start with accurate numbers. And then from there, and I would say, if you don't know how to get to accurate numbers, or if you're not sure your bookkeeper or your accountant can get you accurate numbers, just know this: at the Collab team, we do that we offer accountants, we offer bookkeeping that's specific to coffee. So if you want help with that, just reach out to
Mhm.
us on any of the socials. We'd love to help. But beyond that is, once you get your P&L tight, you need to be looking at those things on a more consistent basis, which is what we do with level 10 meetings, and getting a meeting where you're talking about, these are our numbers. I know, Drew, you've been meeting with a lot of small indies lately. And like, I think that as we meet with different independents, it's so surprising to me, some people that just don't understand their numbers. So like, meeting with an expert that's like, hey, show us your P&L. And then can we help massage your P&L? And then let's look at beyond just a once a month look at your P&L. Let's start pulling some of the data out of your point of sale system. Let's start pulling some data out of how you're using your labor, your time cards. Let's start pushing and pulling those things, because those things matter, because it's week over week looking at the numbers that make you profitable at the end of the month. But if you don't start with an accurate understanding of your numbers, then it's hard to even look at a weekly basis. And I think a lot of coffee shop owners, this stuff doesn't come natural to them. So then they just
Mhm.
neglect it. They just turn a blind eye to it. They just hope that it's going okay, or they work harder, or they try and sell more, or they like try and put in more blood, sweat, and tears. And like, that's going to grind you down, instead of like, no, 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 take a deep breath. Let's just get clear on something that you're not super confident on. Find an expert that can help you. Look at these things and then watch them weekly, because that's how you can make shifts. Because otherwise, things run away on you. And then you're a couple years down the road, like where Starbucks is at. And now you're having to make drastic cuts, where we're cutting. Who wants to cut that many jobs? People hate you when they hear you're cutting that many jobs. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So how can we get in front of that before it becomes a pain point? Hey, experts, we've got something really awesome that we do here at Coffee Experts Club, and that's called the My First Drive-Through Coffee Masterclass. So if you're opening your next coffee shop, I think a lot of times you may think to yourself, I know what goes into opening a coffee shop. I've been doing this for years, but maybe you've been doing it for somebody else. And maybe this is your first option of starting a coffee shop on your own. Or maybe you don't know anything about coffee and you're just like, I'm looking for a good investment opportunity. Starting a coffee shop seems like a good place to put it, and you're going to enter into it. But what you don't know is all the things that you don't know, right? And so what we've done with this masterclass is taken behind the scenes, how you find your first location, what you need to be thinking about in finding a location. We give you a gift in the masterclass where it's a step-by-step process of how you're opening your coffee shop, the different checkpoints you need, from coming up with your plans and talking with the city, and then negotiating a lease. And then how do you build a team, and what are the different pieces you need to be thinking about? It's a great masterclass, door to door, start to finish, completely free on opening up your next coffee drive-through. So check it out. It's at myfirstdrivethrough.coffee, and it's a great masterclass. You won't regret it. We'll see you on the inside there.
Well, I remember when we started looking at P&Ls more frequently at roasters, because we were like, okay, it's hard to make accurate decisions and do things that are impactful a month behind, because that's what we were doing for a
Mhm.
while. Like, okay, we just got our P&Ls in. Labor was, huge the first half of the month, but now we're 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, and we can't go back in time and fix these things, and so keeping those numbers fresh in front of you, and being aware of what those targets are, because a lot of people don't have targets. They don't really know what a standard is or what they're looking for. Or yeah, I've looked at labor that's super high, and a lot of the people are like, "Oh, this is just normal, right? This is where it's supposed to sit." I'm like, "Well, you're actually like 15% higher than what I would be comfortable with." Just so you know, that's possible to run at 15% lower than where you're at now. And so, educating yourself on what's comfortable, and a lot of, especially around labor, is around what works for the customers and the barista. It's a combination of how much baristas does it take to serve a customer at a high level and comfortably,
Mhm.
and how much is too much baristas.
Yeah, and I mean, that takes you down the whole rabbit hole of, okay, well, if I think that I need to have 6 baristas on bar at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to be able to serve that customer at a high level, what is requiring that? Is my bar setup so horrendous that it takes that many bodies to try and get one drink out? Are my drinks so overly complicated that it takes that many bodies to create a drink? Am I creating in-house syrups and I always have to have somebody in the back creating syrups and sauces? Like, these are all things you have to take in consideration. How difficult are you making it for your business to make revenue? Because just the way that you've set up your shop and set up your bar and set up your processes, if those are overly complicated and requiring more labor, maybe you should take a look at, how can I make these things so efficient? I mean, I know we got to the spot in the days of roasters, we had, because every shop was different at the start there, like every bar setup was different. And after a certain amount of time, we were like, okay, we need everything within half an arm's reach,
Yeah.
because otherwise this person's running all the way over there and then that person's got to run all the way over here. And it was just completely inefficient. So if you can look at your business and say, okay, my labor is high. What can I do to fix my labor? I can only get it down to a certain amount of baristas on bar. Okay, how can I fix how my baristas serve on bar? Can I create an assembly line? We did that at Road 68, where it was basically like an assembly line out the window. And you had 3 people and it was just boom. We just created drinks like an assembly line. How can you look at your process to make it more efficient that way to help with your labor? It's this constant reevaluating your business. If you set up your shop, it's not just going to be like that forever and it's always going to be amazing. Like, you need to constantly look at your shop, look at your systems, look at how your bar set up and say, how can I make this better? How can I squeeze a little bit more revenue out of this by decreasing my costs of labor and cogs?
I was really struck by, and this is something that's kind of one of those like sacred, what's it called? Like a
Sacred
cow.
cow.
Yeah. Like, so don't let me piss you off by talking about this, but like Drew and I wrestle through this one all the time, and that's food. Like, so how much of food are you going to bring in house? Because then if you're not careful, like you're actually putting a lot of time into production. It's like, yeah, we can save so much money. We could make so much more. We could be so much more profitable. But it's like, yeah, but you're also taking their eye off the ball of what you want them to be really good at,
Mhm.
which is making coffee and putting it out the window. So can we find a vendor that we could do a full markup with and just sell their food? And yeah, we could make it more if we brought it in house. But I was really like coffee culture guys up there in Corvallis. And I thought that was such an incredible show where they had built out, it was almost like they were a full blown restaurant. And do you remember that conversation?
Yep.
And they had a come to Jesus moment with themselves on, is this the business we want to be in? And even though they were so profitable and doing so good at that, remember they did a whole remodel and completely did away with kitchen and brought in a roaster. And now they have a roaster, and they're like
Yep.
sized down their food offerings and moved to vendors because they realized what we want to be really good at is making coffee, making money off of our roasted coffee and offering foods, but we don't want food to like over arc or like begin to throw shade. And where I've watched people, we're in a relationship right now with a indie that we're consulting with that we're really working through. Is it more beneficial for you to continue to make breakfast sandwiches, or would it be better for us to find a vendor that supplies breakfast sandwiches? And maybe you're a little less profitable on those breakfast sandwiches, but you could also cut the amount of labor that you need, because
Mhm.
right now you need so much labor to be servicing drinks and building your sandwiches. Which one's the better way?
Yeah, if you're saving four or $500 on doing it yourself in cogs, but you're spending $350 in labor to pay somebody to make those sandwiches. Well, you're saving $50. Sure. What if that person quits? There's your $50 out the window in training a new person. So it's like, unless that cost differential is a chasm, I absolutely agree. If I'm going to save $500 on bringing my food in house, the labor to create that savings better be like a fraction of that. Otherwise, you're just trading one cost for the other. And in the terms of, having your hiring or having somebody internally make those things, again, training that person, that's another person on payroll. So now you've got more payroll taxes you're paying, like all of those things spiral to where it's in the end not really that cost effective.
Yeah. And one of the beautiful things about having those numbers and knowing how to read them is that it tells a story. Like you mentioned, why is my labor so high? Is it
Yep.
efficiency behind the bar? Is it knowledge of baristas? Is it am I serving people? Is it an in-house versus a drive-through issue? Are the wait times
Mhm.
long? It gives you the ability to kind of understand and translate what's going on in the shop into why your numbers are being affected in such a way. Or for example, for cost of goods, it's like, okay, my cost of goods is 10% higher this month, than it was this same month last year, but my sales are the same. What is going on? Did my costs rise enough to justify that? Am I holding more product in the back of the store? What is causing this increase in number? And, over time, reading these numbers, getting used to these numbers, you start to see that rather than
Yeah.
just mystified by, percentages and where things should sit. And one thing we do on our L10s is every week we track, and if there's a spike or if there's a dip, we take a note. If it was like, okay, we did a remodel recently, we were closed one day, so our weekly sales are going to be down. So we're going to note that. Or if there was a holiday, or if we did a deal, or if it was snowed in, all these things give you insights into how to operate, your business in a more functional way for the people that you're serving.
Hmm.
I think the danger sometimes is we just assume we know. And the danger with assuming we know is a lot of times we can go off historical knowledge that may no longer be relevant, but we're living our lives as if it's still true. And so I think that that's so crazy for a business because it's like, no, you're remembering the way things were 3 years ago. Like a lot has changed in 3 years. COGS have
Hmm.
changed in 3 years. Like our whole workflow may have changed. That we'd be opening a couple of locations that we actually built differently than the location you're thinking of. Like, but we can get in these set patterns. And I think that the thing I love about numbers is numbers don't lie. Like
Hmm.
that I don't I don't need I don't need that whole diatribe you just took me down, explain to me whatever you just explained to me. No, but is our labor higher than our percentage should be? And when you have historical numbers that can tell you that, that's a very easy conversation. But a lot of people aren't looking at that frequently enough to make those kinds of decisions. Hey, I noticed the labor was up by 3% last week. I noticed labor was up by 10% last week. What happened? Oh, we were training a barista. Awesome. I don't want to see that end over end, that becomes the new norm. And that we just
Hmm.
are not watching when we're cutting people loose. Or does the cup count matrix justify how many people we've got working on bar? Like what are sales saying? What are transactions saying? Like there should be a dollar amount associated with how much labor we have on it. Are we watching that close enough? And are our managers really obeying it enough to say it's time to send somebody home? Or let's have the hard conversation of, do we really need two people for that closing shift? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Or should we be sending somebody home for this and just letting one person tie things off? Because holding on to people too long is what really causes labor to climb, and it's got to be justified by the numbers. So what Starbucks is doing, although I don't love big layoffs like that, is it really is telling the story of let your numbers dictate how your shops are run. And if you don't have tight numbers, that's the first thing you need to work on because it educates you all the way downstream.
And don't be afraid to dive in, because I mean, like for me in high school, I was afraid to look at my grades because I know they suck. The more that I looked at my grades, the more that I was able to make, the moves where I needed to in order to improve those things. And in the same way, looking at your numbers can be stressful. There's an anxiety that hangs over your head if you don't know what you don't know. But the more you look at them, the more you do the work, the more you get in front of it, the more confident you can be in your shop, the more confident you can speak to your managers and baristas and how the business should operate. And the more that they'll respect it as the employees because they know you care, they know you're involved, and they know you know what you're doing.
And they want to succeed. And unless you give them
Hmm.
numbers they can chase, they don't know if they're being successful at their job. They're like, customers love me. We're selling stuff. I must be
Yeah.
doing good. And it's like, those things can both be true and us be doing bad. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like, let's,
Yeah.
let's have an understanding of how it all works. Anyway, boys, coffee experts, I hope you enjoyed it today. Definitely a topic that we enjoy talking about here. And we hope you enjoy your week and we'll see you next week here on Coffee Experts Club.
Thanks so much for joining us today. For those of you who are looking to become a coffee expert yourself, We offer an incredible, thorough training online for opening your first coffee drive-thru at www.myfirstdrivethru.coffee.